The Anderson retail headquarters gleamed in the morning sun, 50 stories of glass and steel reaching into the Chicago skyline. I stood in my brother Mark's new office, formerly our father's office, and tried to keep my expression neutral as he delivered the news of my termination. My name is Sarah Anderson, and at 33, I had just watched my family's legacy, my life's work, and my revolutionary retail management system be stolen by my own brother. It's nothing personal, Sarah, Mark said, leaning back in Dad's leather chair, the same chair where our father had sat 6 months ago, before his stroke, telling me how proud he was of my innovations. The board feels the company needs stronger leadership in the tech division. I glanced at the digital clock on his desk, 9:47 a.m. In exactly 24 hours, he would be presenting his new retail management system to the board. The system I'd spent 3 years developing. The system that could revolutionize how major retailers handle everything from inventory to customer data. Of course, I said mildly, I understand completely. Mark's smile faltered slightly. He'd expected tears, protests, maybe even threats. After all, I was the emotional one in the family, according to him. The one who cared too much about employees, who wanted to revolutionize retail for more than just profit. Security will escort you to clear out your office, he continued, regaining his composure. Standard procedure, you understand. We wouldn't want any sensitive information leaving the building. I thought about the small camera hidden in my office plant, the one that had been recording his late-night meetings for the past 3 months. The midnight conversations with board members, the promises of increased profits if they supported his takeover, the methodical way he planned to steal my work and push me out. Of course not, I agreed. Though I'm sure you've already secured all the important files. Everything related to the new system is safely under company control, he said smugly. Your personal access has been revoked. He meant the official servers, the documented development files. What he didn't know about was the hidden backend I built into the system. The fail-safes I'd implemented when I first noticed files being copied late at night. Congratulations on the presentation tomorrow, I said, standing up. I'm sure the board will be very impressed. They will be, he said, then added with fake sympathy, I know this is hard, but you'll land on your feet. Maybe a smaller company would be more your speed. Somewhere less demanding. I shouldered my bag, thinking about the encrypted drive in my apartment containing footage of every meeting where he'd plotted this takeover. You're probably right. Anderson Retail might be too big for someone like me. The security guard, Jim, who'd watched me grow up in this building, gave me an apologetic look as he escorted me to my office. This isn't right, Miss Sarah, he muttered. It's okay, Jim, I said as I began packing my personal items. Everything happens for a reason. My office overlooked Michigan Avenue, the same view I'd had since joining the company fresh out of MIT. While the security guard wasn't looking, I quickly retrieved the hidden camera from the Peace Lily, Dad's gift when I was promoted to head of technology 3 years ago. Need help with those boxes, Miss Sarah? Jim asked as I finished packing. No thanks, Jim, but could you do me a favor? Could you make sure my plant gets a good home? Maybe in the security office? It needs water every 3 days. Jim nodded, understanding in his eyes. He'd been here 30 years, had seen the way things had changed since Dad's stroke. I'll take good care of it, he promised. In the elevator, I checked my phone. 3 messages from Lisa, my lead developer. They're locking us out of the system. Mark's team is taking over everything. What do we do? I typed back, stick to the plan. See you at the usual place tonight. The lobby was busy with morning traffic, employees hurrying to their offices, unaware that the company they worked for was about to change forever. Janet, the receptionist who'd given me candy when I visited Dad as a child, wiped away tears as I handed in my security badge. This isn't what your father would have wanted, she whispered. I know, I said. But sometimes things have to break before they can be fixed properly. Outside, Chicago's spring air was crisp and full of promise. I walked to the corner where my car was parked, placed my box of belongings in the trunk, and pulled out my other phone, the secure one that even Mark didn't know about. A text from my contact at the SEC. Documentation received. Extremely interesting reading. Meeting still on for 3 p.m. Confirmed, I replied, bringing additional evidence. That evening, I sat in my apartment reviewing the video footage from the hidden camera. Mark's face glowed with triumph as he outlined his plan to various board members. Sarah's too soft for this business. The system needs a stronger hand. Think of the profit margins if we implement it my way. Of course, I developed the core concepts. I just let her handle the technical details. My laptop pinged, an alert from the hidden backend I built into the system. Mark's team was trying to modify the source code, probably removing my digital fingerprints. Little did they know that every change they made was being logged, every attempt to alter the documentation creating an unalterable record of their tampering. My phone buzzed. Lisa calling. "Everyone's in position," she reported. "The team is ready. But Sarah, are you sure about this? Once we do this." "There's no going back," I finished. "I know, but Mark left us no choice. He's not just stealing my work. He's planning to turn the system into something it was never meant to be. Something that would hurt thousands of employees, millions of customers." "Your father would be proud," Lisa said quietly. I looked at the photo on my wall. Dad and me at my MIT graduation, his face beaming with pride. He'd built Anderson Retail from a single store into a national chain, but he'd never lost sight of what mattered: the people who made it work. "Tomorrow's going to be interesting," I said. "Make sure everyone's ready." After hanging up, I walked to my home office and opened the hidden wall safe. Inside was the evidence I'd been gathering for months: financial records showing Mark's manipulation of company funds, documentation of his secret meetings with competitors, and most importantly, the original development logs of my retail management system. I pulled out Dad's letter, the one he'd written just before his stroke, the one Mark didn't know existed. Tomorrow, its contents would change everything. The next morning, I dressed carefully in my best suit, the one Dad had bought me when I became head of technology. As I fastened my mother's pearl necklace, I thought about legacy, about responsibility, about the right way to run a business. My phone buzzed. "Board meeting starts in 1 hour. Everything is in place." I smiled at my reflection. Mark thought he'd won, thought he'd successfully stolen everything I'd built. He had no idea that his moment of triumph was about to become something very different. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't just exposing the truth. It's letting your enemies present their own lies to the very people they're trying to deceive. I grabbed my laptop and headed for the door. It was time to show my brother exactly who he'd underestimated. Anderson Retail's main conference room was packed with board members, executives, and major shareholders. I slipped in quietly just as Mark began his presentation, taking a seat at the back where my brother's triumph would have the perfect view of its own undoing. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mark began, standing at the head of the long table in an expertly tailored suit, "today marks a new era for Anderson Retail. What I'm about to show you will revolutionize not just our company, but the entire retail industry." I opened my laptop silently, connecting to the room's wireless network. Lisa's text appeared. "Backend access confirmed. Ready when you are." "This retail management system," Mark continued, clicking to his first slide, "represents thousands of hours of development, a seamless integration of inventory management, customer data, and predictive analytics." My fingers moved across the keyboard, accessing the hidden protocols I built into the system. On a screen behind Mark, his presentation continued flawlessly. He had no idea that every click was being logged, every demonstration creating an unalterable record. "The potential for profit maximization is unprecedented," he said, warming to his theme. "By implementing aggressive data collection and dynamic pricing, we can increase margins by up to 40%. Several board members nodded approvingly. They didn't understand that what Mark was proposing would turn my system, designed to balance efficiency with ethical business practices, into a tool for exploiting both employees and customers. "Question," called out Janet Chen, one of the newer board members. "The privacy implications of this level of data collection are completely manageable," Mark interrupted smoothly. "The technical details aren't important right now. What matters is the bottom line." I pressed enter. On my screen, a message flashed. "Original documentation uploaded. Timestamp development logs active." "Let me demonstrate the system's capabilities," Mark said, turning to the main display. He clicked confidently, expecting to show a carefully curated demo. Instead, the screen shifted to show side-by-side comparisons. The original ethical design specifications I'd developed, next to Mark's modified versions showing how he planned to exploit the system. What? Mark clicked frantically, but the presentation was no longer under his control. Interesting modifications, I said, standing up. All heads turned, especially the parts where you removed all the employee protection protocols and customer privacy safeguards. There must be a technical glitch, Mark stammered. Security. They can't help, I said calmly. The system is responding exactly as it was designed to, by me, its original creator. The room erupted in murmurs. I walked to the front, each step measured and confident. Board members of Anderson Retail, I began, what my brother has shown you is a corrupted version of a system I spent 3 years developing. A system designed to modernize retail while protecting the rights of employees and customers. A system our father approved and supported. She's lying, Mark snapped. I developed. Really? I pressed another key. The hidden camera footage began playing. Mark in late-night meetings, plotting his takeover, admitting to stealing my work. That's illegal surveillance, he sputtered. Actually, said a new voice from the doorway, it's evidence in a federal investigation. Special Agent Sarah Torres from the SEC stepped into the room, followed by 2 colleagues. Mark Anderson, we have some questions about certain financial transactions related to this software development. Mark's face went from red to white. This is ridiculous. I am the CEO. According to company bylaws, interrupted Howard Chen, the head of the board's legal committee, your interim CEO, pending review after your father's recovery. He held up a document, a recovery that, according to his doctors, has progressed significantly. In fact, we received this letter from him this morning. I smiled, remembering Dad's face when I visited him at the rehabilitation center last week, showing him the evidence of Mark's betrayal. His hand had been steady as he'd signed the letter revoking Mark's interim authority. The original system documentation, I said, distributing tablets to the board members, shows exactly how the development proceeded. You'll also find evidence of how Mark attempted to modify it for unethical purposes, along with records of his financial misconduct. The board members scrolled through the documents, their expressions darkening. Mark looked around wildly, finding no allies. You don't understand, he tried. The profit potential is substantial even without exploiting people, I cut in. The system as originally designed would increase efficiency by 30% while improving employee satisfaction and customer loyalty. I have 3 years of test data proving it. Which is why, Howard Chen said, the board will be calling an emergency session to review leadership of both the company and this project. The next hour was a blur of SEC interviews, board discussions, and security escorting Mark from the building. I sat in Dad's office, Mark's office for such a short time, looking at the city sprawled below. Miss Sarah. Jim the security guard stood at the door. Your father's here. Dad walked in slowly, leaning on his cane, but his eyes were clear and sharp. I always knew, he said, settling into his old chair, that you were the one who truly understood this business. The way you built it, I said, not just for profit, but for people. He nodded. Mark never understood that. Success without ethics isn't success at all. The next few weeks were intense. The board unanimously voted to reinstate Dad as CEO, with me as Chief Technology Officer and heir apparent. Mark faced SEC investigations and criminal charges. The system rollout proceeded as originally designed, earning praise from both industry analysts and workers' rights groups. 1 month after the board meeting, I sat in my new office, not Dad's, but one with an even better view of the city. Lisa knocked on the door. The first quarter results are in, she announced, grinning. Employee satisfaction up 42%. Customer retention improved by 35%. And profits, she paused dramatically, exceeded all projections. Send them to Mark, I said, in his new office. The Federal Investigation Office. He never understood. I said that doing the right thing could also be the profitable thing. Dad stopped by later that day, moving better now after months of rehabilitation. Your mother would be proud, he said, looking at her picture on my desk. She always said you had my head for business and her heart for people. I thought about legacy then, not just the buildings and profits, but the impact we have on lives. Mark had wanted to build an empire. I wanted to build something that mattered. Last week, I received an invitation to speak at a retail industry conference. The topic? Ethical innovation. The future of retail technology. I thought about Mark sitting in his prison cell after his conviction for fraud and corporate espionage and realized that sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying your enemies. It's about building something so meaningful that their attempts to destroy it only make it stronger. The Anderson retail headquarters still gleams in the morning sun. But it's different now. Employees smile more. Customers praise our service. The board talks about ethics as much as profits. And every morning, when I walk through the lobby, Janet still offers me candy, just like she did when I was a little girl who dreamed of making her father proud. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't in the moment of triumph, but in what you build after the battle is won. Mark tried to steal my work, but he could never steal my vision. Because true success isn't just about power or profit. It's about creating something that makes the world a little better than you found it. That's what Dad taught me. That's what I proved. And that's the real legacy I'll carry forward. The security camera footage from my office plant still sits in my safe, a reminder that sometimes the best defense against betrayal is simply letting people reveal their true nature. But I don't watch it anymore. I'm too busy building something better. After all, success is the best revenge, but only if you succeed in the right way. And as I review plans for expanding our ethical retail system nationwide, I know that the right way was worth fighting for. Because in the end, it's not about who wins or loses. It's about how you change the game itself. The rain fell softly on the day we buried my grandmother, Eleanor Rose, the last link to my mother's family and owner of what my in-laws dismissively called that dusty old junk shop on Main Street. What Rose Antiquities lacked in modern glamour, it made up for in character. 3 floors of carefully curated history that had been my second home since childhood. My name is Emma Taylor, and this is the story of how my grandmother's worthless antique shop turned out to be worth more than anyone could have imagined, in ways that went far beyond mere money. Really, Emma, my mother-in-law Barbara said as we left the funeral, her designer umbrella held carefully away from her expensive suit. You can't possibly be thinking of keeping that old shop. It's taking up prime real estate in the historic district. The smart thing would be to sell to developers. I clutched the shop's keys tighter in my pocket. Grandma Eleanor had given them to me a week before she passed, along with a cryptic message I was still trying to understand. The real treasure isn't always what it appears to be, dear. Sometimes you have to know where to look. The shop stays, I said firmly. My husband Michael shifted uncomfortably beside me, caught as usual between his wife and his mother. But darling, Barbara persisted, you have a career in finance to think about. Managing a failing antique shop is hardly. I said no. My voice came out sharper than intended, drawing looks from other funeral guests. But I couldn't help it. The shop was all I had left of both my grandmother and my mother, who had died in a car accident when I was 12. Eleanor had raised me among those antiques, teaching me the stories behind each piece, training my eye to spot quality and craftsmanship. That evening, after the mourners had gone home and Michael had taken his parents back to their hotel, I went to the shop alone. The bell above the door chimed softly as I entered, its familiar tone bringing tears to my eyes. Everything was exactly as Grandma had left it. The Lewis XV chair she'd been restoring still sat in her workspace, the ledger still neat on her desk, the displays still perfectly arranged. I made my way to her office in the back, remembering all the afternoons I'd spent there doing homework while she worked. The old roll-top desk stood against the wall, its surface covered with papers and catalog references. As I began sorting through them, a leather-bound book caught my eye. It wasn't one of the shop's regular ledgers. This one was older, its pages yellowed with age. Inside, in my grandmother's elegant handwriting, was a catalog unlike anything I'd seen before. Each entry detailed not just items and prices, but complex codes and references I didn't understand. Some entries had stars next to them. Others had letters that seemed to correspond to nothing in the shop's inventory. "Oh, Grandma," I whispered, "what were you up to?" A knock at the shop's front door made me jump. Through the glass, I could see Dr. Marcus Chen from the university's history department, one of Grandma's regular customers and closest friends. "I'm sorry to disturb you, Emma," he said when I let him in. "But Eleanor asked me to come. She left something for you with me to be delivered after." He handed me an envelope, thick with what felt like a key inside. "She said you'd need this once you found her special ledger." My hand trembled as I opened it. Inside was indeed a key, old, brass, intricately carved, and a letter. My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, then you found my real inventory book, and Marcus has kept his promise to deliver this key. What I'm about to tell you must be kept secret for now. There are people who wouldn't understand what I've spent my life protecting. Rose Antiquities isn't just an antique shop. It's a safe house for some of history's most significant lost treasures. Your grandfather and I started this work in 1962, helping European museums recover artwork that had been stolen during World War II. Over the years, it evolved into something bigger. The coded entries in my ledger, those are the real items, hidden in plain sight among the regular inventory. The stars mark pieces that museums and collectors have been searching for decades. The letters correspond to their true provenance. But you have to be careful. There are people who have suspected what we do, the Carmichael family in particular. They've been trying to buy the shop for years, not for the real estate, but because they think they know what's hidden here. The key opens a hidden room in the basement. Take Marcus with you when you go down. He knows about some of the pieces, and you'll need his expertise to understand the full scope of what's there. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you this while I was alive. It was safer for you not to know. But you're ready now. You've always had the eye for it, even as a child. Remember when you spotted that fake Tiffany lamp at the Anderson estate sale? You were only 10, but you knew something wasn't quite right about the glass work. Be careful who you trust, and whatever you do, don't let anyone pressure you into selling, especially not the Carmichaels. All my love, Grandma Eleanor. P.S. That Louis XV chair I was restoring. Look under the seat cushion. The papers there will explain everything about the Vermeer. I looked up at Marcus, my mind spinning. The Vermeer? As in Johannes Vermeer? The Dutch master? He nodded gravely. Perhaps we should check the basement before we discuss this further. The walls here, they have ears. Just then, my phone buzzed. A text from Michael. Mom's insisting on coming by the shop tomorrow morning to help you catalog everything for the estate sale. I tried to tell her no, but you know how she gets. I looked at Marcus, then at the key in my hand. How long will it take to see what's in the basement? Several hours at least. Some of these pieces, they'll need careful documentation. Then we better get started. Barbara Winston isn't known for her patience, and tomorrow morning she's going to learn that her daughter-in-law's worthless inheritance is anything but junk. As we headed toward the basement door, I could have sworn I heard Grandma Eleanor's soft chuckle among the antiques. The real adventure was about to begin. The basement key turned with a soft click that seemed to echo through the silent shop. Marcus held the flashlight steady as we descended the narrow stairs, past the regular storage area I'd known all my life, to a section of wall that had always looked perfectly ordinary. Your grandmother was brilliant with hiding things in plain sight, Marcus said, running his hands along the wooden paneling. Most people never realize that this wall doesn't match the building's actual dimensions. The hidden door blended so perfectly that even knowing it was there, I barely saw the seam. It swung open silently, revealing a climate-controlled room that stretched nearly the length of the building. Oh my God, I whispered as Marcus found the light switch. The room was a museum-quality storage facility. Temperature and humidity monitors blinked steadily on the walls. Carefully labeled crates lined industrial shelving units. Paintings hung on specialized racks. Display cases held smaller items, each one tagged with the same coding system I'd seen in Grandma's ledger. Start with the chair, Marcus suggested. The Vermeer connection is significant. I found the Louis XV chair where we carried it down last week for Grandma's restoration. The cushion lifted easily, revealing a hidden compartment containing a thick file and what looked like original provenance documents from the 1940s. During World War II, Marcus explained as I read, many Jewish families in Amsterdam hid their valuable artworks before fleeing. One family had a Vermeer, a previously unknown work. They disassembled the frame, hid the canvas inside this chair, and sent it to America with other furniture. Your grandparents helped track down the family's heirs. But this documentation, it's about more than just one painting. Eleanor and Robert, your grandfather, they built a network. Museums, art historians, legitimate dealers, all working to recover lost art and artifacts. This shop became a safe waypoint. Items could be hidden here, documented, authenticated, and returned to their rightful owners. I moved through the room in a daze, matching codes from the ledger to items on the shelves. Each piece had a story. Ancient artifacts looted from archaeological sites, artwork stolen by the Nazis, cultural treasures taken during colonial periods. The Carmichaels, I said suddenly, remembering Grandma's warning. They know about this. They suspect Gregory Carmichael's father was involved in some questionable acquisitions. He's been trying to find evidence of lost pieces for years. That's why they keep trying to buy the building. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Michael. Mom's determined to come by first thing tomorrow. Says she's already called an estate liquidator. I looked at my watch. 11:30 p.m. How many people do you trust completely to help us document all this tonight? Marcus was already on his phone. I can have a small team here in 30 minutes. All vetted. All who worked with Eleanor before. The next 8 hours were a blur of careful photography, detailed documentation, and incredible discoveries. Dr. Sarah Williams from the Metropolitan Museum's Authentication Department arrived at midnight. Professor James Chen, Marcus's brother, from the Smithsonian joined us at 2 a.m. Each new finding left them more amazed. This Buddha statue, Sarah whispered, examining a seemingly modest bronze figure. It was looted from a temple in Myanmar in 1945. Museums have been searching for it for decades. The provenance papers are all here, I said, checking the ledger. Grandma was helping the temple reclaim it. James was carefully examining a collection of Native American artifacts. These were stolen from a reservation museum in 1972. The tribe has been trying to recover them ever since. By 7 a.m., we had preliminary documentation of over 200 significant pieces. Their combined value was staggering, but more importantly, each item represented a piece of history that could finally be returned to its rightful owners. At 8:30 a.m. sharp, the shop's bell chimed. Barbara Winston's voice carried down the stairs. Emma, we're here to help you start clearing out this mess. I met them in the main shop area, where Barbara was already placing post-it notes on pieces she deemed salvageable for the estate sale. Michael stood awkwardly by the door while his mother took control. I've called Harrison's auction house, she announced. They can clear everything out by next week, though honestly most of this should probably just go to Goodwill. That won't be necessary, I said calmly. I've already had the inventory evaluated. Oh honey, she laughed, I know you're attached to your grandmother's little collection, but we need to be realistic about Mrs. Winston. Sarah Williams appeared from the basement stairway, her Metropolitan Museum ID badge clearly visible. I'm Dr. Williams, head of authentication at the Met. We're going to need you to step away from that salvageable piece you just tagged. It's a 15th century Italian devotional piece that was looted from a church in Florence in 1944. Barbara's hand jerked back from the small wooden panel as if it had burned her. What? Emma, James Chen called from the basement door. The Smithsonian's director is on FaceTime. He'd like to discuss the Native American artifacts. Michael found his voice first. Emma, what's going on? I held up Grandma's ledger. Rose Antiquities wasn't just an antique shop. It was a safe house for recovering stolen art and artifacts. Grandma and Grandpa spent 50 years helping return lost treasures to their rightful owners. But that's impossible, Barbara sputtered. Eleanor was just a small-town antique dealer. Actually, Marcus said, emerging with a familiar-looking folder. She was one of the most respected art recovery experts in the world. She just preferred to work quietly. He opened the folder, revealing newspaper clippings dating back to the 1960s, stories of mysterious recoveries of lost artworks, each one mentioning an anonymous American source. The shop stays, I said firmly, and the work continues. Just then, the bell chimed again. Gregory Carmichael strode in, his usual air of entitled confidence firmly in place. Ah, Emma, I heard about Eleanor's passing. I have some papers for you to sign. A very generous offer for the property. Mr. Carmichael, I smiled, channeling a bit of Grandma Eleanor's steel. I believe you know Dr. Chen from the Smithsonian. He was just cataloging some interesting pieces, including several that match the descriptions of items your father acquired under questionable circumstances in 1965. The color drained from his face. Beside me, I felt Michael step closer, finally understanding what side of history he needed to be on. The next few months transformed everything. The shop's public face remained, We still sold legitimate antiques to regular customers. But now Michael helped me manage the more complex operation below, carrying on Eleanor and Robert's legacy of returning lost treasures to their rightful owners. Barbara stopped coming by the shop. The one time she did visit, she happened to be there when we returned a medieval manuscript to a small monastery in France. The abbot's tears of joy as he reclaimed his order's lost treasure seemed to finally help her understand that some things are worth more than their sale value. Last week, I found a letter I hadn't noticed before, tucked into the back of Grandma's ledger. Emma, by now you've discovered what Rose Antiquities really is, not just a shop, but a mission. Each piece here represents a fragment of someone's heritage, a part of history that deserves to go home. Your mother understood this. She was helping us research lost artworks when she had her accident. I couldn't bear to tell you then, but I knew someday you'd be ready to know, and to continue what we started. The real treasure isn't in the monetary value of these pieces. It's in the joy of a family reclaiming their heritage, a museum completing their collection, a culture restoring its artifacts. That's the true worth of what we do. Take care of our life's work, dear one. And remember, sometimes the most valuable things are hidden in plain sight. All my love, Grandma Eleanor. The shop still stands on Main Street, looking much as it always has. Customers still browse for vintage furniture and interesting curios. But now I understand why Grandma spent so much time in her office, making international calls in the middle of the night. Why certain pieces would disappear without ever being sold. Why some visitors would leave with tears of joy after private meetings in the back room. Michael helps manage a legitimate antique business now, having left his corporate job to join me full-time. He has a good eye for it, though he still sometimes shakes his head in amazement when we unlock that basement door. Barbara tells her country club friends that her daughter-in-law does something with art recovery, making it sound as prestigious as possible without understanding the real scope of our work. That's fine. Like Grandma Eleanor, I've learned that sometimes it's better to let people believe what they want to believe. Yesterday, a young woman came into the shop clutching a faded photograph of a painting that had hung in her grandmother's house in Warsaw before the war. As I took her to my office and opened Grandma's ledger to check a familiar code, I could almost hear Eleanor's voice. The real treasure isn't always what it appears to be, dear. Sometimes you have to know where to look. Rose Antiquities continues its quiet mission, hiding history's lost treasures in plain sight until they can find their way home. And in my grandmother's old office, I'm teaching my own daughter about provenance, authenticity, and the true value of preserving the past. Some might call it just another antique shop, but we know better. After all, the most precious things often look ordinary to those who don't know where to look.